righty. Welcome. My name is Knutson, and I'm representing all the wonderful developers and Gabe Lopez at RNG Forge. Our game is Kelvin, and we are really excited to share our vision for what we made. So as we go through today, before we start, I do want to start with a word of the status update. Gabe Caldwell insists that demonstrable is a word. You will see this at the end of the PowerPoint, and I just want to prep you guys that it means capable of being demonstrated. There is no demonstrable evidence that Kyle Walters is not a programming robot. So you will see this at the end, and we just want to kind of give you all every status update, teach you something new. But first, we're going to go through our game overview, show you guys the vision that we have for our game, show you what it looks like so far, show you how we got there, and then look forward in the future and predict what risks we're going to face and all the numbers and stuff that Rick Hall likes to see. Alrighty, so you are playing as a third-person action platformer. Your name is SB764, and you are navigating a spaceship called Haven 1. You are an experiment. You're being experimented on by scientists, and they are changing your molecular chemistry. Through this process, you have developed the abilities to change your state of matter. You and another experiment, FO743, will be navigating your environment while changing your state of matter. You play as SB764, and FO743 will be guiding you through. You are following them. You'll see them at the end of hallways and stuff. They're not a full-fledged AI. Don't get all worried about that. But they will be interacting and helping you along with the narrative. We took a lot of inspiration from Prey. For those of you that have played Prey, it is a wonderful game. It gives off a gritty alien corporate vibe while also showing some of the beauty that can be had out in space. We also took a lot of inspiration from Half-Life 2. Not quite as space themed, but it does show the industry and the grit and the corporate greed that we were looking for. And then finally, for those of you that have played Alien Isolation, it shows what an abandoned spaceship would look like and kind of gives off the vibes of both clean and dark at the same time. So that brings us to Haven 1. This is the spaceship that you were on. The entire game will take place on this spaceship. You'll be navigating through, doing platforming sections, all while taking place on Haven 1. Now let's see what this looks like. This is our overhead map. The entire game will revolve around the hub. That is the lobby of the spaceship. You will start in the containment facilities. SB764 decided to show up for today. And they will be moving through to the hub. Once they are in the hub, that's more like a playground for the player to practice their abilities. Look around at the environment, look out windows, out at the expanse of space. From there, they'll move into the foundry. They'll navigate through the foundry, following FO743. They'll make their way back through the hub to the hangar. And then finally, at the very end of the game, we'll come back to a destroyed version of that same hub, which we believe will be a very interesting and unique level design challenge that our player will be able to navigate around. Alrighty, wonderful. So let's start off and show you what these zones will look like. This is our reference material for the containment facility. Now, the containment facility will be both a prison holding cell, while also a testing facility with some science experiments laid around. And it'll really show off the horror that you just went through. And it'll have a sharp contrast with what's coming next, which is the hub. Now, the hub is going to be polished, clean, corporate lobby in space with sleek floors, metal walls, gold railings, all the works, with this one centerpiece hub, centerpiece statue right in the middle that shows off the corporation's name, which is to be determined as of right now. Like I said, once you leave the hub, you will enter the foundry. Now, the foundry is more industrial. It is hot. It is, there's moving parts and robot arms all around. And while you're navigating through this foundry, you'll be interacting with, machinery, moving platforms, moving railways, all that sort of stuff. And so these reference images really show what that's going to look like. And then finally, you'll end up in the hangar. Now, we believe that the hangar will have one major spaceship in the middle, and that'll allow for some really unique platforming sections, having some dark and really interesting lighting options when it comes to a large open hangar that also has platforming sections. And then finally, you'll return to the hub. It will be destroyed. There will be fires coming in from the sides. There'll be some cold coming in from the hangar. And how exactly are we going to showcase kind of those temperatures? And we're going to do that primarily through lighting and VFX. So these are the lighting references that we have so far. In fact, Neil actually just had a workshop with all of our LDs to kind of teach lighting and show how we're going to implement lighting into our game, because we really believe that the spaceship will provide a ton of opportunities to show off unique lighting. So these are some of our references. You can see the dark but also bright fires, the cold and like empty expanse of space. You can see all that stuff shown here, and then we're hoping to emulate this type of lighting into our game, as well as visual effects. Now, I'm about to get into it, but I've talked about temperature a little bit before, and the environment we want to denote temperature really well. So there will be hot sections, there will be cold sections, and we will be doing that through visual effects. So whether it's a haze and flame in the corner, whether it's through frost from a broken air vent, all of that will be in the environment for the player to navigate around, and they will tell the player what states they are limited to. Now, I've talked about states in the past, and now we're going to jump into what that actually means. So the player can move between 3 different states. You can start in the fluid state, you can go to the gel state, and then you can go to the solid state. The player has almost complete control over which state they go into. If you're in the fluid state, you have certain abilities. If you're in the gel state, you have other abilities. And if you're in the solid state, obviously, you have other abilities. Now, the temperature will also affect the player. If you are in a hot room, you can only stay in the hot and medium states. If you are in a cold room, you can only stay in the cold and medium states. And we believe that that will provide really unique opportunities to slowly introduce the player to gameplay without overwhelming them with 3 states with unlimited potential. And we believe that this will be a great way to introduce the mechanics. And like I said, the player can move in between those states down the line, moving back and forth between them. Now, what are these abilities I've talked about? The fluid state has a really, really cool wall climbing ability. They are a solid or a smaller frame, so they can move through smaller gaps, they can go underneath smaller ledges, and they can crawl on walls. The medium state is basically your typical bipedal human that can run around, that can double jump, it can wall jump, and it can wall stick. And finally, in the solid state, the player curls up to try and conserve its energy and rolls around it's also the only state that is hazard resistant. So the player can move between these and use the abilities based off of what state they're in. So we've already put together some ideas on how this will work, but I want to show you a couple of our favorite examples for what the states would look like. So in this example, you start in the gel state, and as the player runs, they can run and stick to a wall, but they are not quite tall enough or jump high enough to reach the top. So when they're on that wall, they transform into the fluid state and crawl the rest of the way up. But that state can also wall jump. So for example, if you're walking down the environment, you wall jump, you can stick, and then reach higher points through the fluid state. And then I've left out the solid state so far. So let's see a couple examples of what that would look like. In the medium state, you're running through the environment and there's a hazard in front of you. Let's say it is sparks. Your player can run down, they can transform into the solid state and then move through that in unharmed. The solid state is the only one that can withstand enemy hazards. The solid state also has more weight to it. So let's say you see a button on the ground, but you don't quite have enough momentum to hit it. You can move to a higher point using your other abilities and then roll off to put enough pressure on that button. Now, we have some pretty simple ones to start out, but we are really excited to showcase some of the ways that all of the states can be chained together. So this is my favorite example, and you gotta bear with me, it's gonna get pretty exciting. You run forward, you change into the solid state, you slide down, you see a small gap, oh shoot, you got to change to the fluid state. You keep going, you fling onto the wall, and then finally you wall jump to safety. Boom, I'm a platformer, there you go. Now, that is what our game is. That's what our game is. But let's show you a little bit about the process that we've taken to get here. This is our wonderful team. You can see we've got some shirts, pretty exciting. And we're having a lot of fun. We put culture first on our team. The game development will come, and we're working really hard on developing the game, but we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive, we were having open brainstorming, and we were having fun. So these are just some examples, instead of just telling you guys that, these are some examples of what it's like to be on RNG Forge, to wake up and show up to fire.
What game design brainstorming looks like in grad school? acting out mechanics with our team. Wall jump and climbing on walls is a big feature.
Follow us on TikTok, that is RNG Forge. Like, follow, comment, all that stuff. At the end of the day, we also like to check in on Gabe Caldwell's coding stream. I just like to sit and watch and listen to him talk, but for some programmers, they've actually helped him solve some bugs. He streams live on Twitch. His name's Offline Rocker. So if you want to follow him, go right ahead. And this is just a moment where I might have caught him doing something he shouldn't.
Oh, I forgot to toggle.
God damn it, Gabe.
I'm toggling right now.
So there was about 50.
All right, now I'm locking time.
Watching his code. And then also we like to have Halo. About once every other week or so, we've been playing some Halo. This is what it looks like to play Halo against Neil and Piper. This is my perspective. I thought I was good at Halo until I played against Neil and Piper, and then they just stomped me day after day. But when it comes to actually making the game now, we have focused on portfolio first by far. And so everything that our game revolves around has been made and decided due to our portfolio-centric mindset. Our target audience, we want it to be played by recruiters. That's why we have an option to just start in the hub and play with the programming options. We can start in the hub and look around at the art. We want to focus on just letting, if a recruiter is interested in hiring you, they can play the game and quickly see the impact that you have on the game. So some of the decisions that were guided by that came from our programmers. We wanted to give them a unique stake system challenge. Having a character controller that swaps between different abilities is a really unique task that we don't think has been done before. We haven't seen anyone implement it quite the way we have. We didn't want to overwhelm them with one really complex mechanic that all programmers would get a little bit of credit for. We wanted each of them to have one mechanic that they could go all out and polish the hell out of it and make it look nice, while also making it look smooth with the other states. So we believe that that really helps our programmers get jobs. When it comes to art, those transitions allow for really unique challenges for our tech artists and our animators to make them look smooth, make them look crisp, and make each mesh have a very unique and visually appealing look to it. We've also focused on each of these zones having either hero pieces or unique environment pieces that the artist can grab onto. And because of that, we have all those zones for the LDs to make. And the LDs will be able to play with simple yet flexible mechanics. And thanks to the restrictions with temperature, we won't be overwhelming them. So if an LD is working on a hot room, all they have to worry about is a wall jump, a wall stick, and a wall climb. And that's pretty much it. They don't need to worry about the solid state fight yet. But thanks to all of our decisions that we've made, we believe that we'll be able to get everyone on our team a really good job, and each of them have a personal ownership on a section of the game. Now, let's show you what we've done so far. That's a beautiful picture for you. So let's first talk about the design. So our designers have been hard at work making the Foundry level map, the Foundry block mesh, the containment level map, the hub block mesh, and LVPs for all of our zones. This is what it looks like for the Foundry block mesh. So on the left, you can see the level map. That is just kind of showing the path the player will take, the way that they introduce different mechanics, the way that they'll have, the way that they'll progress in the game. And then they've also made some really impressive block meshing so far. This is the level map for the hub. This is where the containment facility. This is where the player will be introduced to those mechanics. So, we've always put tutorials should come towards the end, but we do want to focus on teaching the player a little bit by a little bit, because there is, multiple different options for each encounter. So we believe that the containment level map will help the player be introduced to those mechanics a little bit slower. And then finally, we have our hub. And this, like I said, is the playground for the player to play on until the very end, until the very end when it gets destroyed. So in this zone, we wanted to really show off the scale. We wanted to show off lighting. We wanted to be able the player to be able to roll around stuff and wall jump off stuff. And we're still adding in some of those mechanics as we get the metrics in, but that is what the hub will look like. And don't forget about our artists. They have made the art style guide. They have made character concept art. They have made a prototype of the fluid state mesh, which I actually just saw was getting worked on today. It already looks better. I can't quite keep up with all the great work we've done. We have an exterior ship prototype. We have selected assets with the LDs that are similar in style to what they want. We're going for stylized realism when it comes to making our art. So we found asset packs that we can both adjust to it and implement straight away. And then we have a whole bunch of lists throughout all of Jira, all of our capstone experience that are going to show what we're going to be building. So this is what our character concept art process looks like. We have worked on a bunch of different character concepts, iterated on if we want it to be fully translucent, if we want it to be a human, if we want it to be an alien. And we went through a lot of processes with that. We've landed on somewhere that I think is a good middle point with SB764 here. So he is going to have some gel and slime-like tendencies in the middle state. Obviously, in the fluid state, he'll be translucent, and that'll be a big project. But we wanted to be able to polish the hell out of that fluid state and let the middle and solid state look a little bit cleaner. And then the FO743 is just going to be a more primal version of that same character. So we're not redoing the whole rig, we're not recreating the whole player. We're just going to be changing the materials and adding some extra, extremities onto the character. This is what our gel state currently looks like. Well, currently it's already changed, I guess, but this is what it looks like earlier this week. The fluid state will be kind of wiggling around. Look at him go. Look at that. Yeah, I love it. Alrighty, and these are the asset packs that we've selected. So the ones on the left are the ones that fit our style already and are going to be able to be used in the game with little to no modification. The ones on the right, you really wanted to include in the game, but we are currently looking at the numbers on which ones we're going to modify, which ones we're just going to, all we're going to be doing is changing the materials on them and changing the colors. So we're lucky enough to have found asset packs that fit what the artists are going to envision with the art style, but we are modifying some of them as well. And then this is the ship exterior. So at the start of the game, the camera will zoom in and see what the ship exterior will look like. I think it's pretty beautiful. Let's see that again. Look at that. Wow, that's pretty cool. Alrighty, now this is my favorite part. Neil, come on up here because it is demo time. Let's go. We have a fully working demo that our programmers have been very hard at work on. All of the stuff that we have already spoken to you about already has been implemented into the game. It's just takes polish now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second. Switch to duplicate so that Neil can see what he's playing. I don't need that. And then I got to share it one more time. And Gabe Lopez will be sending out a YouTube link. So if you're watching on Zoom and it's too choppy, we have a fully fledged demo for you to watch as well, in case in case the quality is not quite what we were looking for. All right, you got it. Thank you very much. All right. Welcome to our live demo of the K3LVN. We'll be showing you the core mechanics that our programming team and TD team has created, as well as a preview of the hub block mesh. As you can see, we're currently on the spaceship hub Haven 1. We are at the center point of the game, and the player can return to this location between the other three zones. The player can use this area as a playground to test their abilities. We'll start by giving you a quick look around our environment and give you a sense of scale in this excellent block mesh. Go ahead, Neil. Wow. Wonderful. The character in front of you is SB764. They're currently in the gel state. In the gel state, they're a humanoid bipedal that can run, jump, double jump, and wall stick. Neil will now demonstrate what the wall jump looks like and jump onto our little demo area. Or sorry, the double jump. Woo! Let's see that again. Let's see that again. Come on back. I want to see that double jump. All the way from the top. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Now we're going to show you what our wall stick looks like. They cannot move along walls. However, they will slowly lose traction and slip down the wall. This will force the player to move quickly and master their movement. By jumping towards the wall, Neil's going to stick to the surface. Go ahead. Also, those aren't error messages. That's what this program is for us to keep in mind as well. While sticking on the wall, the player can jump from it. The double jump resets after every wall they jump from, allowing for riskier platforming sections. Neil, show us what a wall jump looks like. Alrighty. The player can also chain wall jumps together to reach higher platforms. Neil will now look up to the area that he's going to go to and use the skills of the end gods to wall jump to that top of this area. Go ahead, Neil. Alright, very cool. So this is the core of the gel state. Now we're going to transition to the fluid state. By the press of a button, Neil will raise his temperature and melt into the fluid state. Go ahead and show us what that looks like, Neil. That is pretty cool. Now this is just a proxy model, as our tech artists are finishing up building a usable rig for procedural animation. As you can see, the fluid state is smaller and slower. For now, it's a speed. In the fluid state, you can stick to and climb on walls. You will now demonstrate what it looks to climb on and over a wall. Alrighty, that's the core of the fluid state. In the fluid state, in tandem with the gel state, which is going to allow for a wide variety of platform options to chain, wall jumps, wall climbs, all sorts of stuff like that. But for now, we're going to transition to the solid state by the press of the button. Show us what the solid state looks like. Woo! Look at that. That's the ball. That's the little boy right there. As you can see, he's been transformed into a solid sphere. He is heavier, slower, and can roll around the environment. He also gains momentum on ramps. Neil's going to now show us what it looks like to roll around the environment and down a ramp. Go right ahead. There we go. I love it. That's all we have to show you today. I'd like to thank the programming team, the tech design team for their incredible work in getting these 3 different character controllers with the state change back in the system, all working in the past few weeks. We are absolutely blown away by the success that they've achieved. I'm going to give Neil a quick second to just run around and show you what some of the combinations look like, but most of that we'll be showing you in vertical slice. I'll show Wall Street. I'm not, yeah, there we go. All right. Let's give Neil and programming team and the tech design team a round of applause.
Oh my God, it's 4:30. Alrighty, give me one sec to, how do I bring back the Zoom controls? Control Alt Shift H. That's confusing. Okay. Stop share. Go to extend. Share. Alrighty.
Now we're first going to look at, into the future, show you some of the risks that we've developed, the risks that we've predicted, the ones that we've mitigated, and then the ones that we are currently trying to mitigate. So the 3 main risks that we have are the level size. And as I've said before, we are going to be using asset packs, but they will fit our art style. We want to allow our level designers to build what they want and allow our artists to be able to focus on things that they would like to work on as well. So our asset packs are going to help us build the levels that we've created. When it comes to this enemy, he's not going to be a fully fledged enemy AI. He's going to have simple scripted interactions that you see him at the end of the hallway. He does some stuff, runs away. He will not be directly interacting with you. And then finally, we were originally going to have a complex mechanic with the solid state, but we wanted to cut down on the overwhelming work that we wanted to do. So we put him into a ball. He's now very simple. All 3 of those risks are now mitigated. Moving forward, though, we do want to find solutions for these 3 things. When it comes to the aerial transitions, we're just actively trying to find a way to maintain momentum and ensure that those transitions are smooth. With the liquid state, we do want it to be translucent and be a inverse kinematic grid procedural animation, and that is going to eat up our performance. So we're trying to find ways to ensure that when it is added to the game, it will not eat up our performance. And then finally, we are actively looking for ways to mitigate the differences with so many levels. We want our level designers to be able to have ownership of one of the zones, but at the same time, we want the levels to feel consistent. So right now, we're looking at ways to improve our coordination and make sure that our levels all feel consistent. Now, it's Rick's favorite. It's projection time. So we want to paint a story. We want to show you how exactly we plan on gathering our data and using it to develop our scope. So these are what our Jira dashboards look like. Anytime a developer comes in, they can simply click on a bookmark, go to their dashboard, and they will see all of the issues that they have to work on, all of the time that they've worked in this sprint, and the amount of time left in the active sprint that they're working on. So by the click of a button, they can see everything that they need to know real quick. Gabe did a great job of making these kick-ass Jira dashboards. We also have pretty intense workflows that show, if I'm working on one assignment, I can move it into the review section. My designer will be, my designer or lead will be alerted to that, and they can then move it into done or back, simple Jira stuff. We have decided to store all of our tasks into epics, so we can clearly sort through what we need, and we can see the history that has already gone into that. So if I want to look at audio tasks, I can click on the audio epic. I can see all the work that's been done for it in the past sprints. I can see all the backlog items, and it really helps declutter the environment so that we can focus on, what exactly we're looking into that day. Now, some charts. These are the metrics we have for the previous sprint we were just working on. So these are not including meetings. So anything you've seen in this PowerPoint so far, whether it's concept art, prototypes, any of that, that is all seen here. These are the hours that we've done in the past sprint so far. We're really happy with those, and we're going to use them to help figure out how exactly we can move forward. These are the development hours we are going to project over the next 7 months. We are scoping at 80% capacity to allow for a buffer room if bugs pop up that we're not aware of, if unplanned tasks come in, or if people are just feeling a little bit burnt out. So we want to give them some space to solve that stuff as we go. Now, moving forward, this is kind of the breakdown of where all of our hours are going towards, based off of all of the team members except leads. So you can see how many hours we have remaining, and we're going to use these two pieces of information to collect our scope as we move forward. Now, we're already gathering information on our capacity. However, still being only the first sprint, we can't quite find our true capacity. So we are going to be using this chart on the left to gather what our sprint, this is our sprint 1 capacity. This one, paired with the next 2 sprints, we'll be able to find our true capacity and show you that in vertical slice. So this was all the work that we did over the past 2 weeks, based around what we already had planned. And then on the right, you can see how much time we spent on meetings during these first 2 weeks. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, it is higher than it will be going forward, but we spent a lot of time, obviously, in design meetings, narrative meetings, and we spent a huge chunk of time trying to predict what issues are going to arise before they happen. So when it comes to those state transitions, the programmers spent a lot of time just in meetings, making sure they're all on the same page, how exactly they're going to do it, as well as level designers getting all on the same page with how we're going to have proper lighting, proper visual effects, proper level progression. So going forward, those meetings will be a little bit smaller, but we are pretty happy with what we've done so far. Now for vertical slice. These are our commitments for vertical slice. Some of them are broad, but most of them are pretty specific. You'll be seeing that word demonstrable again, status update, word of the day. For vertical slice, we want to have that fluid state rig ready to go with the wall crawling at a demonstrable state. We want to have a gel state with double jump and wall jump that is demonstrable, which essentially means it's going to be more polished and fluid. We want to have a demonstrable solid state with resistance to the rolling that allows us to gather speed and crush objects or land on buttons. And then we just want that state system polished. So when I was talking about aerial transitions before, that's going to be one of the big things we're facing. Now, when it comes to art, we want that gel state, which is the middle state. We want that character mesh and character rig to be ready to go. We want the stage 2 state transition animations. So as the character is moving from state to state, we want to have an animation that pulls them into that next area. And then finally, we have stage 1 fluid and solid state mesh and 13 props for the foundry. The foundry is going to be our vertical slice level. Our level designers want that fully built. That's why we have the white box and block meshing already done. And we want that to include its lighting. We want everything for the foundry to be ready to go with 13 unique assets, all for you to be playing as you're going through the vertical slice. We also want the hub white box to be fully complete through 2 versions of block meshing into white box. We want dynamic traversal sound effects. So as you're moving into that specific state, we want a sound effect to be playing that's going to be the one that's in the final version of the game. We want to have the first lightning passes done on all of our levels. And finally, we want the player metrics to be complete so that when we are building all of those levels, the level designers know exactly what they're going to be, how far they jump, how high they jump, and all of the sizes and stuff that we need there. So being a pretty vain project lead, I do want to give full credit to my team. So everyone on my team, please stand on up and give yourselves a round of applause. That is our game, Kelvin, and also thank you to Zach and Cassandra. They've been incredible helps with making our game so far. If my leads would like to come on up and join me at the front, and we can answer some questions and get some feedback. Where's Eric? Oh, there. All righty. Nick, do you got feedback for us?
Yes, I do. Okay. First off, this isn't exactly an art thing, but I just noticed these different states that you have. And I guess when you were showing me the mechanics in a 2D format and you changed over to the liquid format, and I noticed you took the character and moved the character in an upward direction, it just made me think, I don't know, whenever, as soon as I think of water, I think of the thing like flowing down because gravity is gonna pull the thing down. It did make me think, if you're gonna do that, what if you chose, liquid, solid, and gas, right? Because the gas, I could see that as something that would be rising or whatever. Solid, I think that's pretty obvious, and then the liquid, you could take that and it can form and it could go through cracks and do a bunch of different stuff. But I don't know. So
That's a really cool idea. Yeah, we might actually look into that too.
yeah, I just thought it was a little bit odd, like I said, that you turn into liquid to move in an upward direction, but just something to think about. The other thing that I saw was like whenever you went to the prototype that you showed off going through these different states. I believe it was the solid, and I'm not sure which state. It would just change from one sphere, and it was like you just changed the texture on it. And for me, it was like on the screen that I have, such a small change that it was really even hard to kind of notice that really happened. So I think I would probably at least do some kind of color change, something else. I think there was maybe a marbled type of texture on the solid, and maybe that was the change in the difference. But I might make that just a little bit more obvious, I guess the other thing about the prototype level is, at a certain stage, I think it's appropriate. You've got these colored textures on there that have the grid pattern, and I've seen that from it's part of like a prototyping pack, and I think it's pretty cool. It works at a particular stage. I'll keep reiterating everything I've been telling the other teams and stuff like that. I just want you all to move as quickly as possible to start working with more specific art and getting art together with a design team, working in harmony. So you have that for the prototype thing. If you can slide on over to what you might consider more of your art-centric slides, that'd be good. The other thing I noticed about your presentation was you're trying to do this sci-fi theme. You have pretty good piping and everything on the outside. Your whole presentation is pretty minimal as far as like what you're putting together as far as theme. So I know that can be driven further. I did notice like this on this slide here, you got, what is it? The environment and containment. That lettering there's a lot of empty space above that where you could take that text, push it up, push it to the left a little bit. And I always want to try to find opportunities to try to get the images on screen a little bit larger, right? I do think you might want to be a little bit careful about how big the piping is along these images. And like, as I look at this now, I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but I do want to focus in on the imagery versus like how much are we doing for this this extra fluff and making things look good. So there is definitely a balance in all that. The other thing I thought was maybe a little bit odd from a presentation standpoint was at the very bottom, you've got your text that, I guess if you treated this like a website or something like that, these are your different categories and that you can kind of click on and you can go to and see for the presentation. Is that what's going on at the bottom?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty similar. It's just kind of letting the audience know what part of the presentation we're on.
Yeah, so nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's just a personal preference of mine, but I might try to put that at the top or maybe a sidebar or something like that. I think I understand you're trying to conserve some space and everything, but again, I might look at that way just to move it towards the top. Again,
Okay.
you might get some different feedback on that, but that's fine. I did notice some inconsistency on some of the concept stuff. So can you go to the slide with your concept where I think you're showing off the different states? This slide here. So there's pretty drastic difference between the image that's off to the left and the image that's off to the right, right? So I don't know if it's a matter of you need to choose one particular artist on the team and they're handling more of that or not. I don't know. I don't know what the story is. I don't know who's doing the art and everything else like that. But I guess that's not yeah. To me, that's not really the point. I want the team, no matter what you present, I want it to feel pretty cohesive across the board, right? So if you are showing things off in a particular state, you try to drive everything to the same point. If you're telling me that these are just like sketches and we're doing some thumbnails and everything, that's one thing. But what I would be expecting is if you're doing some design exploration and it's at this quicker state, that I'm going to see a bunch of different designs, right? So one of the things I pointed the artists to, and they know about this, and you could all take a look at it too. I have it in my office. We got a couple different books that we ordered. It was a project called The Skillful Hunt, and I was turned on to this book by one of the head concept artists at EA. And he said, yeah, go ahead and pick up this book. It's a really great book. So it's a design school that part of the project was to take an older tale and reskin it and make it more modern. So they did a bunch of different designs for characters, weapons, vehicles, environments, and everything else like that. But there's a certain way of working to get yourself whittled down to like, what is a final design? And what it really boils down to is at the very beginning, you want to be working in a smaller format where you can churn out a bunch of different ideas quickly. So like on a sheet, you'd lay out 20 to maybe 30 designs at the top. Like they're really smaller, they're labeled correctly. You run through those designs, whoever's your art director, or maybe you're getting feedback from the team, whatever that process is, you want to take those really quick designs. You want to get down to the core of like, hey, we really like A, F, and G or whatever, but we want to combine the elements of H and I or whatever. So that becomes some kind of rule set to get to the next round. And in the next round, maybe from there, you're only doing like 3 designs and they're much larger on screen. You're focusing a bit more on the details and everything else like that. You're not going too crazy because you want to keep it in check because again, this round is all about getting to that core idea. So some of that stuff's going to be kind of throwaway and it's not a big deal. It's just part of the process, right? And then after you kind of whittle that down to that final idea, that's whenever you do your final color study and maybe you start to work on your model sheets. And then maybe you're also doing a nice illustration where you put that character or creature, whatever it is, into something for the environment. So it becomes more like a finished illustration, right? So that's really the process that you want to run through. I do see on screen like this use of color. I see these really bright colors being kind of used and everything else like that. Yeah, I mean, you would introduce color at a particular stage, but it almost feels to me like the color isn't being thought of as like what it should be for the design. It's just like, hey, this feels nice to draw with this. No, I've done this before, and I've seen plenty of artists do this. If you're sketching with like blue line pencil or red, and you can emulate this in the computer, I like to have that as an underdrawing, but then I draw over the top of it and I ink it and everything else like that. So I don't know if that's really the process that's going on right there. To me, it feels like everything you showed me about your levels, you got this gritty kind of sci-fi thing, you got this moody lighting and everything else like that. So then I I see these super bright saturated colors and I'm like, I don't know exactly what's going on there, right? Like why the choices for that? I think Rick mentioned it for the earlier critique, for the earlier group, but it's these things that you're showing for the environments. Could you take these illustrations that you have, could you overlay it over your environments, and would it blend? Would it feel like it actually fit in that environment? I don't think so. I think that would stand out like a sore thumb, right? So I think those are some things that you really need to kind of think about. The other thing that I didn't really mention at the last presentation, which I wanted to interject, but in the past, some things I think Rick and Ron asked for was like, could the art staff basically take a little tiny slice of the world, maybe a corner of the environment, and then put a character in there, light it really well, but spend some time trying to figure out like really what is this art style going to be, and how much effort does it take us to build that? And maybe it's not the main character, maybe it's some little tiny creature or something like that. Maybe it's some little cool environment piece, like I'm telling you. So it's like just a concentrated effort on art to figure out what is this look actually going to be. And again, with the use of asset packs, I think there's probably an additional effort to figure out how do you take all those elements, how do you harmonize it together, how do we build over the top of that, how do we make our art fit within that particular space. And basically you need to learn rule sets. These are our rules that we have to put together in order to build this style, right? So right now I don't know exactly what that is, right? I see a bunch of really cool images, I see possibilities for direction, but right now, like, some of the art that you're making doesn't exactly match up with some of the imagery that you're using. So I do think there's going to have to be some kind of discovery phase. There's going to have to be some type of figuring out of like, yeah, what is it that we're really trying to make, and can we prove that out as a process, and can we do it on a smaller form? Okay, that's me.
Thank you for your feedback. Yeah.
All right, can I sound talking?
Sweet. Okay, here, I'll throw on video too. All right. So very fun presentation, Riley and gang. I was remembering vibes of Matt Reed, one of my favorite presenters right from the first cohort. Such just fun energy. It was just, I looked forward to those presentations, and you all had that kind of vibe, which is, that's a good compliment. Okay, I don't give that compliment a lot. And you reinforce that too with all the stuff about culture and the fun, playful videos. I love that. I think that just makes this place an even more fun place to be. And so I love you all for that. I think you'll probably need shorter nicknames for your characters. You know, it's kind of like the Star Wars Finn, FN257, whatever, you know. You'll probably need that at some point because it's kind of hard to refer to them as that, unless that's the bit, right? I mean, you can make a joke of that the SP764, like that could be a joke. But you know, they'll probably need to be something a little shorter. Great, that's perfect. You did a great job of doing some animated examples in PowerPoint. I love when people take that technique. It's kind of like one-page designs like brought to life, and so it's really, really powerful. So I appreciated that. It made things so clear that at some point I'm looking through my bullets and I'm just like, I don't have a lot of notes right now because you're doing too good a job of explaining things. So how dare you, you know? I just got to the point where it's like, oh, yep, I get it. Like, no, I don't have a question about that. I get it. No. So that's another good compliment that you want to get. I never do that. I have like 15 notes, bullets minimum for every capstone. It's like, y'all have like 5. So it's like, wow. I agree with Nick's sentiment around the possible coolness of gas. I will say that, you know, this concept has been around the block and it's always expressed as liquid, you know, ice cube and gas. And so I kind of liked the fresh feeling of kind of skipping the gas part, especially for a platformer. A gaseous state in a platformer, too easy. So it's like, oh, we'll skip that and then we'll allow it to be, you know, an anthropomorphic mode, like the gel in the middle. But then the ball mode is different too than like an ice cube just sliding around. It's rolling around. So that still feels different. So I really liked this 3-state mode myself, and that idea of the gel. making it justified of this is why it exists that way, which also allows you the possibility for gel to be key resource in the game, to gain and lose it for various powers and so forth, could be useful. And so that's another note I would throw at you, which is that you might want to employ something like that. And it can effectively be a de facto health bar where you're losing gel for doing various things. And that can create a cost so that you can't just have certain overpowered abilities that you're using all the time too much, because they may take too much gel. It also might be really impressive, but also major scope bomb if you were to change the scale, because you're losing gel. I'm getting smaller, right? I know you're like, whoa, that's a great idea, but oh my goodness, how that's a lot to do.
Brought that up to Zach at one point, and he's like, "That
Good.
was the hardest part of Wick." So good luck.
Yeah, right? I recognize that's crazy hard. But if you did achieve it, because you can achieve so many interesting puzzles and mechanics with that, because less gel actually means that it's easier to fit into certain places. And then you might want to do that and then go find more gel resource in order to get back up, because you need to be big enough to like cover a vent in your fluid state to as a pressure plate for some puzzle or whatever. So there's a lot of fun possibilities that could roll from that, despite its scope bumminess. You said that the enemy doesn't interact with you. So why am I afraid of the enemy? He doesn't hurt me. He doesn't.
It's mostly like a narrative device. The enemy is pushing you forward, maybe destroying something to change like what you thought an area was going to be.
Okay, well, pushing me forward, as in like chasing me, as in if he gets to me, he'll kill me, but he can't.
Well, like more pushing the narrative forward.
As in like cutscene happens, something in the environment happens. Now we have a motivation.
Yeah, we've considered, having more interaction, and I think if we have like the time at the end scope wise, we would love to like include something like that, and maybe we can get with you and figure out exactly how that would work without blowing up our scope. But ideally, we would have exactly what you're saying. Yeah, that'd be really neat to have him chase you or something like that.
Okay, that's a good honest answer. It's like, yeah, we want to, but will we get there? It's like I can accept that. I don't know that you need it because you got puzzling and platforming rolling around, and you don't have to have it. Yeah, you'll see if you get there. And when you alluded to scripted behaviors, were you talking about a behavior tree in Unreal?
Mainly like cutscenes, kind of
Like,
No, I mean for the AI.
for the like scripted behavior that like you get to a certain place and like they destroy something that's ahead of you, so you have to deal with that now.
Yeah, you won't even need a behavior tree for that. Okay. Yeah. So because you had so few bullet points, I actually get to do something I don't get to do often, which is just ask you about your story. Usually there's bigger fish to fry that we need to work on first and not worry about that, but I get to ask you about that. I feel like there's some cool sci-fi elements you've got them being experimented on. Any other thoughts that you'd like to share about that we could respond to?
Or if anything, do you feel comfortable explaining, or Ismail? We've had some people on our team really express a passion for narrative. So just a quick little, anything else you want to add to Ismail or Ed? Anything? To the narrative that we didn't get to talk about. Anything about the narrative that really stands out we didn't get to speak on.
The idea with the narrative is essentially that you are an experiment who is trying to escape, and most of that is predicated off of the fact that another experiment already escaped and started causing chaos, which has led to a lot of destruction around the facility. So a lot of that's why XO, whatever, I usually just call him Foe, tends to be more of a scripted narrative thing, is because it is mostly there to justify why the facility is like this and how you are escaping, and to create a tension as kind of a rival with what you want the future of this facility to be.
Okay.
It's less about directly conflicting someone so much as someone else sharing space with very different points of view.
We have a fun ending that we are going to save for you, because interacting with that other player, we want to flesh it out before we present it, but we have some unique ideas on how we can make the story get home.
Okay, just make sure that you don't show your plot twist ending first in a demo where, because if it's bad, right? I mean, like it's always a huge risk. It's just a huge risk. Right? That's what they all say. Yeah, right. Just get good. But yeah, that happens where it's like there's all this planning and all this work, and it's just kind of like it falls flat, and it's like, well, you didn't get any feedback on that, and it shows. So yeah, we're the folks that you get to share it with, I do respect the fun of even surprising this audience though. So I don't want to take that from you. So just get feedback somewhere, right? And you can surprise us with it. But yeah, I like that idea of a foe being somewhat of an antagonist, but also maybe an ally there in your similar kind of state, literally, and they went through the same process. So that could be something interesting. That could be that somewhat of a trickster character where you're not sure of their allegiances and what they're going to do. So there can be some fun playfulness with that. Cool, right? That's all my notes. Thanks. Yep. And me.
Cool. All right. Well, unfortunately, unlike Ron, I didn't have that many bullet points to begin with, and then Nick stole about a third of them, and Ron stole about a third of them. But that's good. I mean, faculty is seeing a lot of the same things, and so that's to be expected. And there's only so much to pick on with this stuff, so everybody's going to be fighting for those bullet points. So overall, yeah, I probably shouldn't compare one presentation to another, but I'm going to anyway. This was the best presentation for sure of the four, but that just makes a benchmark because you got people biting right at your heels. The best, not by a large distance, but the best for sure. So now you have to keep striving to improve because they are going to catch you and run right past you. These capstone teams always learn, right? So you set the pace, but there's a long way to go, and I can actually see all of them being able to overtake you at some point. So you got to keep running. So I did have a couple of questions. You did show that slide where the character was going from point A to point B to point C. Like, are you going to start down here and then it's going to go over here through the hub, go to the left, go to the right. So the question is like, do you expect that to be like a set path on rails? Because it looks like when you get to the hub, the player could go to any of those locations, but you kind of look like you had in mind that they were going to go to particular locations in a particular order. So I'm just curious what the intent is there.
Yeah, I think the intent is that you get to the hub and like the door of the hangar might be locked and you have to go to the foundry to achieve your goal of the foundry. The door of the hangar unlocks there.
Okay, so you are going to block off all available paths that you don't want them to go to. Okay, and that's fine. Although you will find there's a percentage of people out there who just really hate that. They see the door and they're like, "Oh, you're just going to lead me by the nose from A to B to C." Games on rails do that, so it's not necessarily the end of the world. In part, kind of decide whether the audience would accept or reject that would require me to know who the audience is. And kind of we did the same thing with the previous project where I didn't really see any details on who the audience is. But that's the type of thing where that can work really well for one kind of an audience and another kind of audience totally hate it. And so I still, at some point, I want to see who the audience is to get a feel. I mean, all the mechanics look cool, but it's cool as a relative thing depending on who's playing the game. So, and even though, you're kind of creating a portfolio piece and maybe you could arguably say the developer is the audience, I still want to understand them, your perception of them. So I'm big on that. I really want to know precisely who it is I'm trying to entertain because, different people react to different things in different ways. Also, with respect to the mechanics at this point, and again, we're early, so this is not a critique. It's putting something on your radar. You're completely character centric with your mechanics. I know at some point, like some parts of the environment set on fire and stuff like that. But like, really get mileage out of mechanics. You got to make sure that the environment itself has active mechanics that are associated with it, so that combination of character abilities with environment abilities kind of creates the different opportunities for gameplay. And that will give you opportunities to kind of get creative with your level design. And just if you create a set of tools that the environment has that interact with the player in different ways, then your level designers will be able to sort of experiment with those Lego style and come up with cool stuff. That's actually kind of, we've seen that done in a few other games, in capstone games, and not all of them do it, but I think the ones that do stuff like that, they get a lot more depth out of the mechanics. I just had a question about, like, you mentioned the enemy, but the enemy is basically like an offstage evil voice who occasionally sets fires when you're not looking. Does that mean that this spaceship station, whatever that you're on, is completely devoid of all moving things other than you?
When you say devoid, you mean other living things or other moving things?
Well, I mean, a robot. Yeah, I actually was asking, like, are you gonna have a little Roomba robot running around? Like anything that could be a mob or a bad guy or something, you know, or is it just gonna be completely empty, you in a giant empty space station?
Well, I think part of the idea is that the area that the game takes place in isn't the entire space station. It is a subsection of the space station that is now effectively quarantined.
Right, and so you can justify it, but the answer to the question is then it's empty.
As of now, yes.
Okay, and there's no plans to put anything mobile in there.
Not that we consider it.
That's fine, and I could understand why you would want to do that for scope reasons, there's stuff like that. The reason I asked the question though is a lot of times when I've seen games do this before too, as capstone games, we're like, okay, we have the player character, and then there's no other mobiles, there's no other NPCs, and you really have to be careful that you don't create a gigantic empty feeling space. It's really very easy for the world to feel static and lifeless. There are things that you can do environmentally and whatnot to try to give the impression. I mean, games don't necessarily need bad guys. You don't really have them too much. Do you have them in Portal? Not in Lab.
Well, yeah, the little bots.
The little bots, you do have, well, turrets, but yeah. But the idea, you know, it's hard to visualize something where it's just completely empty of anything that is, you know, robot or an NPC or something. They can feel, you know, like you're walking through a graveyard, and that's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, but you got to be aware of it, right? And I think if you're not going to have any for scope reasons, that's great, but you got to compensate for it some other way. You know, like in Flicker of Hope, right? You know, they started off with a little candle, but then they got that crazy leper nun who's chasing you, and they got the mosquitoes that are coming after you. There's still a few things out there that are moving around that gives the world some feeling that there's life in there, right?
We will have, so in the foundry, there is like a conveyor belt system that there are like essentially war machines being built on them. So there's a potential that one of those could be active. There's also the head scientist will be taunting and interacting with the player. We could have essentially a drone that's around that.
You could, and it doesn't actually even have to be something that moves, right? I mean, you've got the computer in Portal that just like sings happy birthday and shit and taunts you, and that makes it feel popular, right? So that's what I said. I think there's things that you can do, but I want to caution you against like just making a world that's empty except for you.
That's a great idea. Honestly, we expected the mechanic and state change system to take months. And the fact that we got like a working prototype shocked us, and we're really happy about that. So that does free up. Obviously, it's not fully polished yet, but it does free up some time for us to work on things like that.
And I do not want to throw a scope bomb at you. I think there are ways to do it that don't necessarily involve building like huge numbers of articulated models that you have to animate. So, you know, you make that decision. I just don't want you to make a world that feels empty. Also kind of, it occurs to me, I love kind of this idea that you go from one room to another, and sometimes they're on fire, and you emphasize that there's very different lighting conditions from one to another, which is pretty cool. So a couple thoughts immediately come to mind with that. It sounds like to some extent there's going to be dynamic lighting in some of these things and lots of lighting effects. So you got to be super conscious of optimization, super conscious of frame rates. So I'm definitely going to encourage you to, as you develop, pretty much just make it a default. Frame rate is on screen. You you shouldn't work on it. You shouldn't be level design. You shouldn't be doing anything unless frame rate is on screen. And like, pick some target that you don't want it to go below. And then like what I would do is like, if you say, I don't want to go below 30 frames per second, then I'd have it turn red if it goes to 45, you know, and because as you add stuff to the game, it's going to sink more and more, right? And that's the nature of the beast. So it feels like dynamic lights in here. That could be a performance hog. So just putting it on the radar, you want to make real careful that you're not creating problems there. Also, just kind of wonder about like if I'm like if this room is on fire and the hallway is a completely different lighting setup with a different mood. when I go through that door, are there weird transition problems as those two completely different lighting conditions kind of collide in the doorway? I don't know. It might look terrible. I don't imagine it would create any performance problems or anything like that, but make sure that it doesn't, like, you don't have any weirdness the way it looks transitioning. I don't know what you want to do about that, but just look at it and see. So I really love the idea of kind of highlighting individual contributions like in a game lobby, because the purpose of this game is a portfolio piece, and that's actually really cool. Keep in mind that there will be overhead involved in doing that. There's some development effort. I think it's a great idea, but make sure you schedule for that. Can you go back to your commitment slide? Okay. Right, you say 13 props for Foundry. Where'd you come up with that number?
That was based on going off of the asset list that we created from.
So that's a list of what you need. How do you know you can do it?
So it's 13 props for 2 artists, 6 and 7. So each prop right now has an average. I don't have the numbers on screen, but I do have the numbers.
Yeah, put it in there in the next presentation, right? It's great, and I love the fact that you put specific numbers of things, and I have, this many transitions and this many animations and whatnot. But like, well, part of pre-pro we're at right now is that you are justifying those things. You're saying I've made measurements, and so I trust you that you have made those measurements, but like, put them on the screen, right? Prove to me that you can do each one of those things. Right. So that's an important part of pre-pro, is setting those benchmarks so that, especially when you get to the end of pre-pro and vertical slice, and you're going to give me this big list of here's all the assets and animations and sound effects and particle effects I'm going to do between now and the end of capstone. You can't just throw them out there. You can't just go, feels like I could do it. Right. Yeah, 13 feels completely doable with your 2 environment. You get out there and justify it. Right. You mentioned that you had that slide where you had the different asset packs, like here's the ones that are close to our style, and then the ones on the right, we're gonna have to sort of rewrap them or retexture, whatever. Great, I'm glad you know that you want to do those things. Are you planning on doing that before vertical slice, or any portion of that before vertical slice?
This is a pretty new thing, so I'm not sure if we have the answer to it yet.
So it would basically be determined on what is going to be needed for the levels we're working on for vertical slice.
Okay.
Some of the packs have hundreds of essentially chunk assets.
So I think you're going where I'm going, which is like, I just give you crap about, I want to justify stuff. And so that wasn't listed on your commitments, rewrapping those things. So it's not going to get done. It might get done if you decide you need to, but you need to have some basis to understand how long that's going to take, because there's hundreds of assets. And Nick was talking about that type of stuff before, like there's effort involved in doing it. So make sure you organize at what point, whatever point you decide to do that, it needs to appear in a schedule somewhere. But that's, again, just sort of putting something on your radar, because like I don't really have a lot of complaints, so I just gotta put stuff on your radar and ask a few picky questions. So the woohoo worked the first 4 or 5 times, and by about the 12th time I just wanted to stab my own eye out with an unsharpened pencil. When you show us that woohoo. It was funny the first few times, but like you just gotta kill it after a while. You only get so much mileage out of a gimmick. It was funny the first couple times. Yeah, I'm glad. Don't. Yeah, well, especially because like sometimes it's like woohoo, we got a sphere rolling up a vertical wall. Like it's not really that awesome. So I'm sure it'll get awesome, but like don't overdo that bit. It was funny the first couple times. And we've given that who's it Pam Figueroa, her first presentation, she kind of went over the top with some of the reactions too, and Carbone like hammered her. Yeah, so I wasn't as nasty as Tom. Tom's a fun guy, but anyway, yes, I don't oversell the bit, but I did really love the energy. I did really love the enthusiasm. It was other than that little bit, it was really fun, energetic presentation, and I think that's part of it, right? I mean, you are an evangelist for the product. You're selling it. You're trying to get us enthusiastic, and that's one of the ways to do it. So, really good PowerPoint. I agree with some of the comments that Nick had about, maybe how to adjust it. They're all going to evolve. but it's a great starting point. And overall, this project looks in really great shape. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do for vertical slicing. All right.